All right. This looks good. I already looked at this before. All right. Do 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 do. Oh man, what was I even working on? I had a PR up yesterday. Almost guaranteed gonna have merge conflicts. So far, so good. What am I even merging in here? Nice. Really? All right, now we should behave. Okay, now we're cooking. All right. Nice. Well, this is good. So we've now got ourselves a new. We got ourselves some new stuff. Let's see if it works. Oh, absolutely not. Oh, that's lame. All of the macros. All of the macros don't take my new pointer type. Let's check that out. Right. Let's try that. We'll go straight to the generic vector type. Okay, that's progress. Let's check out structs. I see. He's probably... Yeah. I use these macros a lot. I really don't want to have to rewrite all of them, but I might have to. Okay. This is annoying. All right. Yeah, okay. I wonder if I can just change it. I wonder if that will behave. The issue here is that I just forked the immutable data structures library that I was using for vectors and hash maps. And unfortunately, they all default to use like one thing, and all the macros use the default, which is annoying because my default is different, and I defined what I need externally. So I could just change it to generic hash map, and maybe it'll just figure it out. Let's see if it does. Okay, it does. Now can I do that? That seems to get the job done. I think I'm going to do that. Let's not break too much stuff. We'll let the type inference do the thing. This might be a breaking change, but for now, I think it'll be okay. I need to do the same thing for hash sets. What's up? How's it going? All right, does that work? Would be cool if it did. So I discovered, so a couple weeks back, I wrote a new reference counting library for Steel. So there's a very interesting paper that was out of University of Illinois that I discovered, I don't know, a while back, a long time ago, but I only recently felt the motivation to actually implement it. Which is basically that you can implement a scheme for reference counting, no pun intended on the scheme. You can implement a scheme for reference counting with runtime support. That means you can encode some extra information into the payload for the reference counts, which is nice. So you could say you brand the thread that you created the object on. So you have to create a thread ID. So if you make a new object, you can say new reference counted object, new biased reference count. And it'll say you're on thread 0. So now what happens is any reference counts, any reference counting operations will first check what thread am I on. So it'll check on, if you're on thread 0, it'll say, great, I'm on thread 0. It does a comparison very quickly. It doesn't need to do an atomic comparison. It'll just do a normal comparison with the thread local ID, checks if they're the same. If they are the same, all of the reference counting operations are single thread. They don't use atomic ops, so it's much faster. Now, in the case that you've moved threads, so the object was created on thread 0 and is now being operated on thread 1, and then hit the else branch was the slow path, it'll do atomic operations. And then there's some magic that needs to happen. So there's some bookkeeping, which is why you need runtime support. So there's a couple libraries that implement this paper in Rust, but they don't do it generically. They do it generically in that it's encoded all in the type signature. And they're basically one or the other. You're either in the single-threaded mode or you're in the multi-threaded mode, and not both at any time. Unfortunately for me, with Steel, I could be in the single-threaded or I need atomic or single-threaded ops at any point in time. Values can just move arbitrarily across threads. Even your whole runtime could just be lifted and shifted to a different thread. So the whole point was I needed to implement it myself. So I went ahead and did that. And it's merged into the main line now. And I got some nice performance wins from it, which I'm very happy for. And then I was using this, I wrote my own list library. So then I was able to drop in this new pointer type for that list library. I was leveraging an existing immutable data structures library, which is the vectors. It was originally just called IM. There's IM and then IMRC or something. It was a great library. That seems to be unmaintained. So then there was a fork and people were like, hey, use this new one. It's got all these new fancy improvements. And I was like, great. So I went and I swapped over to that one. It's called IMBL. Now, unfortunately, they let you drop in your pointer type, which is great because you can be agnostic. You can write the same code that's agnostic over ARC or RC. It's the same way I did it for my reference counted or for my list library. The issue that I ran into, though, is that my new reference counting library has different bounds on it. and they weren't compatible with that library. So I ended up just forking the library, which is kind of a bummer because I didn't want to, but I did it. So now it's forked, and now I'm trying to integrate it into Steel right now. Hold on one sec. All right. So I think I just got a building though, which is awesome. Cool. So let's see if it passes the tests. No freaking clue. I hope I didn't break anything along the way. It's very possible I did. But I'd imagine I would have known by now. I have a handful of other libraries that I need to fork in the next few minutes, and I'm starting with this one. So we're doing some bookkeeping, some forking that I've been procrastinating. But this is my long-standing goal of getting more control over all of the data structures that I use for the runtime, so that I can have more control over it is important for me, at least. All right, we have a test failure. Okay. Where are my tests failing? Vectors. Okay. Try that. See how much further we get. Oh, hash sets. One more try. Third time's the charm. I also need to publish a new version of Steel. I told someone I would do it. They asked nicely, and I simply haven't gotten around to it. But that's on my to-do list as well. And then the last thing is there's a library from, it's what I use for FFI. It's called Stable ABI. I need to set up a fork. And I think I need to publish it to Crates.io so that I can start referencing it directly. The goal is that maybe the maintainer will be cool with it. But I believe everything is fine if I just take over the name of the crate, or I rename the crate, but I leave all the imports the same. Everything will just work. So that's the plan. But first, we're going to make sure that these builds succeed. So far, so good. If this passes, I'm going to open up a PR, and I will try to merge it ASAP so that I can get a move on with my next set of things. Oh. All right. I'll open up that PR. I'll let the build kick off in the background over here for a little bit. Oh, I need to remove the release. That's okay. That's going to fail no matter what because I haven't set that up at all. Okay, cool. That's something right there. Now what? I think now I may resume. I don't know. Let's see. What is the other crate that I wanted to mess with? I have another. Okay, well, okay, so I have another PR up for a different library. And I'm a bit fickle on it. I just don't really want to fork it unless I need to. It's kind of like it kind of works. It would be a bit of a shame to fork the library over me being impatient over just not having the one API that I need. I could just... Oh, no. It's not that I want to fork the... Okay. It's on my list library. I need breaking changes. So I kind of want to just move it into steel. Hello. I kind of want to just move it into steel entirely. I got too many crates. There's too many dependencies. Trying to shrink my dependency graph a bit. I also kind of want to resume working on that buffer thing that I was working on earlier. I may do that because it's kind of fun. All right, I'll let that simmer. I'll let that simmer. Okay. So where we left off on this was that I managed to get the text buffers to pull. I managed to get the text buffers to actually work where I could embed the editor and I could pop it open and do stuff. However, I ran into an issue and I actually have not been able to solve it. So I'm going to run it in build and remind myself what the problem was. I believe the issue is I don't have the proper context when I'm asking for where the cursor is. So I might need to do something silly, which is fine. But I'm going to see if it works. Okay, so if I open this, I think it's going to crash if I do that. Right, so we have this floating buffer, but I learned is you notice the cursor disappears. And it's because the context, it doesn't actually have the right context when asking for the cursor. So what I think I need to do is fuss with it a little bit more. So then if I do this again, I think I need to stash the cursor in a box. And I will unbox the cursor, post input handling. And then when I ask for the cursor, I will just return that. Or I'll just unbox it directly. That way I don't have to pass the logic through. And I think that will work. And then I'm going to work on fixing the rendering, because I don't think we actually want to render the whole terminal. I just want a single buffer window for handling text input. That isn't a buffer. Obviously, that's part of the fun here. Okay. Oh, here we go. So this is the thing. So this function here doesn't work. If I do native component cursor, it doesn't work. It actually just fails immediately, but it's failing silently. You'll see it in the logs, but I don't have the logs up. So I think what I'm going to do is like, just going to set a box for the cursor. And then after calling the event handler, I'm also going to, or actually, do we even have this? We might not have it. I need an area. Well, maybe it's just render. So after render, I'll do it. Yeah, maybe I'll do like, I'll do something like that. And then we will set the area to be the rect. And then we will also set the set box cursor as this. And instead of actually invoking this, because what I need to do is I need to store this in the state itself. I shouldn't store it globally, but for the proof of concept, we'll let it slide here. We're gonna unbox the cursor. Okay, it immediately panicked. I know why though. I know why. I haven't fixed that. That's the next thing to fix. Really? Oh no. Ran into a steel bug. That's fun. Index out of bounds. The length is 6701, but the index is 6705. Well, that's not fun. Let's see why. The way to ruin my night. So what would that error come from? That means I'm referencing something before it's defined. That's typically when it happens. But usually it should get caught, which is why I'm surprised this is happening. I guess I can just do some debugging. That's not very helpful. Oh, okay. Let's look at this code again. We've got okay. So it's failing to even like load and evaluate this, which is bizarre. Oh, I know why. Okay, so well, maybe. Did that fix it? No. Okay, just kidding. I was lying. Okay, so if I take this out, does it? No. If I take that out, where is the error? I didn't even change anything, and we're just crashing. Because now I'm calling render native. I'm like, this is where we were when we left off. Like, what is different? And it was working just a minute ago. I guess. Oh, I think I know. Oh, that's really annoying. Okay, I'll put this on the to-do list. I think. Yeah. Yeah. So first, it shouldn't crash. Crashing's bad. That's a bug. The crashing is a bug. But this is shadowing a function. So I bet if I rename these. I bet if I rename these, we'll be in a better spot. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. I'll do some more debugging on that later because I don't think that's very fun here. It's just an issue with the... Yeah, that's a bummer. Well, it's okay. So let's see what happens now. Okay. Okay. That's fine. I need to unbox found area. Call that. Okay, not quite right. Better. Better. Okay, maybe my whole idea is incorrect. I don't think this will work. I wonder why. I wonder why. Well, at the minimum, this is a good bug case, so I need to just leave it to do for myself. Okay. Let's see. How's my CI doing? Hey, what's up? I found a bug, a fatal bug, and now I'm sad. I was build Nix. Nix build is failing. Yeah, I ran into an issue with the with the cursor. The way I was doing the cursor doesn't work correctly, so I lose the cursor. Because the issue is, I learned this. Here, I'll go back to the old way so you can see. Oh, actually, this new way might work. No. Okay, it's not working. So you see the cursor's kind of stuck there? Well, unfortunately, it's because like invoking it this way doesn't work, which is a bummer. So what I was trying to do, so if I do this, you'll see. This, now the cursor just doesn't show up. And the reason for that is that when we create, when we call these functions like handle event, there's like a wrapper in the components layer which does all of this like context refreshing. So anytime you enter a Steel context, you have to like refresh the context, or else it doesn't have access to like the updated context. Well, all of the other ones pass the context in except the cursor, which is annoying as hell. So the cursor, the render, you pass a context in. Handling event passes a context in. Cursor does not. It passes a reference to the editor, which is fine, kind of. But we don't even look at it, so it doesn't really matter. But it also is kind of a fatal flaw, because it means anytime within the cursor function, if you try to call any context, like you're going to error. Like no matter what for the components, like I'm realizing this now, is that the component context will never be refreshed correctly. Which just like is lame. Now it's fine if you don't actually call any functions on the context. So I have two choices. One is to change the component to pass in a context, which is, again, one of those things that like I don't really want to do because it changes the core of Helix, which means now there's more overhead on the merge, because right now it's like is really not, there's almost no code changed in the main code base that isn't like obviously flagged. This would be like, hey, the function signature of this thing is like completely different, which I don't really want to do. I could do a simple way to do it is that the context only needs a mutable reference to the editor. And right now this just passes like an immutable reference. So I could just change it to pass a mutable reference. That would be the signature change. And then I could do everything I need. Which, to be fair, is that might actually be like totally fine. Because if we go check out the component, I'm just curious how it's called. Like maybe it's not a huge deal at all. Because it's not called in very many places. There's only like a handful of things. But again, I don't really want to change it. But it might be necessary. Oh, no, because cursor takes an immutable reference. So it might propagate its way through. No, I mean, it doesn't matter at all. It's like, I think it just only takes an immutable reference because it doesn't matter at all. Like, it didn't need a mutable, so therefore they didn't make it mutable, but like, nothing is stopping it from being mutable. Also, I guess from like a semantic perspective, you're just asking. No, I cannot do that. That is instant undefined behavior. Um, I mean, I could just change the signature. It wouldn't be that much of a problem, I think. Okay, I'm just gonna change the signature here. I'm on a branch. Okay, this is in the main branch. Just gonna change because if I change this signature, no harm, no foul. It's this one I have to change. That is the issue. So now everywhere I implement component, I need to change it. But maybe this will just be a good proof of concept. If it works, perhaps it was a good idea. Also, not everyone who actually calls this function not everyone who implements this even does this. Even like implements this function. So it's perhaps even less of an issue. That might have been it. Oh, one sec. Yeah, I'm inclined to just go ahead and do this, and this will be kind of like a proof of concept. This will be like a proof of concept. Okay, and then that's the last spot, I think. Yeah, I think that's it. No? One more. Right? What does it say? Rust Analyzer's not keeping up. Not keeping up today. Yeah, I'm hoping, though, that this... that this behaves. But I otherwise feel like it's totally fine. Okay, we're in business. I think it's still failing. Oh, it's still failing because I haven't actually done the thing that I need to do. Okay, so now this needs to be Oh, I that's a bit silly. I'm like, do I even need to do this? Can I do it a different way? No, because I want. No, I think I have to do it this way. I think I have to do it this way. As much as it, yeah, I'm talking myself out of it, but I think it needs to be done. Okay, so I now have to go through and edit all of them again because I'm silly. I should have edited both things at the same time. Cool. Here we go. Let's try that. One couple more. Application. And then components. Yeah. All right. In theory, this could do numbers. Now, I also feel like I need to screw with the rendering of the window itself. I don't know if that's particularly true. Okay. One more thing. So now what I was getting at is that I need to refresh the context. And I was not doing that. So now I need to do that. Now I have the ability to do that. To say refresh the context here. So this is my thunk. Let's see how I do it. My thunk is enter engine. We'll just do this. We'll give a little context. Give a little thing here. And we'll say dot consume engine args. And we'll hit him with a little something like that. And then we're going to give it just editor here. And we'll say you can't make a callback here. But now it'll refresh the context. Okay, let's try this. Okay. Oh, that doesn't work either. What the heck? That's very interesting. Why? Okay, so it's probably returning block. Let's just... Okay, so something's not getting returned. How does the cursor move then if it isn't through refreshing the context? Great question. So typically you just like okay, so there's two parts to it. The first is I'm just making a mistake somewhere. But the way the context system or the component system here works is that there is a function you call cursor, and it just evaluates to something. And it evaluates to either a list where the first element is a position of where to place it, and then the second is a cursor kind, which is like a block, something or another. So what's happening is I should be returning that. So like for other components, typically they keep the state around themselves. So like what kind of cursor you want to render is irrespective of like the editor state, like the context of Helix itself. So you just like calculate it somewhere else, like after input handling. So like during the cursor function that gets invoked, you're not actually like returning something of note. You're just like returning something you've already calculated. What's different here is that I'm trying to evaluate and find the cursor position by invoking like a native rendering component that returns the cursor. So what I tried to do earlier, which I'm now realizing in hindsight, I think I just did incorrectly, was I like fetched the cursor during rendering, stashed it, and then during the cursor position, because I wasn't refreshing the context from Helix directly, I was just saying like, return to me the thing that I already grabbed. I'm realizing now the value I return, I think, is just not getting deserialized correctly. Like it's not getting converted correctly. So I need to figure out why. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna do some debugging. Silly me. Every time I really have to fix the stupid. Really have to fix the issue of there it is, set style. This needs to do a bounds check. That's another thing on the to-do list. I hate this just panicking every time I screw up. I zoom in too much because I'm on a big monitor and I zoom in and then I just hit it run and it crashes. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but The point is, anytime I invoke a steal function, the Helix context needs to be refreshed. It was not being refreshed in cursor when I invoked the fetch cursor for component function. That was like the first problem. I thought I had a workaround, and I think my workaround actually will work. I was just doing it incorrectly, if that answers the question. Okay. So now I want to see unbox found cursor. Okay, so it is an issue that I was okay. The issue was me. So the issue is the cursor function expects you to return like something like a list with the position and then like the style. And I was just checking if it's you can pass the style as like a symbol. So you can say use block or hidden or bar or underline, something like that. But because I was invoking the native cursor function and just like passing that through, it was actually giving me cursor kind block directly. So I'm going to as underlying type. I'm just going to check that. Yeah, this is hello, what's up? Yeah, it's a little correct. We're inverting the layers. So right now I'm working on Helix. Specifically, I'm goofing around with the plugin system, I'm seeing what can be done with as it is right now. Right now I'm trying to put an editor inside of the editor. That's kind of like my my little pet project right now. This is called Helix. It's a text editor. If you're familiar with Vim, it's kind of like Vim, but a little bit different. Okay. I think this will work now. And I think so two things are true. One, it was an issue because the context, like there was an issue because the context wasn't getting refreshed. Why was the context not getting refreshed? Because the type signature of the cursor thing didn't let me refresh the context when I set that up like ages ago, and I just completely forgot about it. So that's the first part. The second is that I'm returning a native value and I was expecting it to not be a native value. And then that is an issue. So now the cursor component should check that it is in fact the right value. So let's see if that works. Let's zoom out enough. Okay. Now the cursor's showing up, but the position is wrong, which is crazy. try it again. Okay, I'm getting a position. I'm getting a position and a cursor kind. And I'm passing that through. Okay. We got to go to the logs. I hate going to the logs. Okay, my PR failed. Rerun failed jobs. I really got to learn Nix. I can't seem to find the time to learn it. I really should learn it. For a while, I was putting off learning Bazel. I learned that finally because I have to use it for work. Nix is the next thing. If I learn Nix and Bazel, be cooking. Be cooking for sure. Okay, let's do... Oh, my init time is kind of slow again. People are going to start complaining. I don't know. That's okay. One thing at a time. Okay. Pull this up. Really, that's not showing up in the logs. I was expecting a bunch of logs to show up. That's curious. I am returning. Yeah, I just opened a PR up for Steel for some other stuff. And I have a Nix something or another. I have a Nix step and it just continuously fails. Oh, I think I know why. I have to refresh the Nix lock file, which I do in a... That's fine. I can do that later. Okay, so we have ourselves an interesting thing. So I'm trying to get the cursor. Let's make sure I'm actually getting the cursor right. Okay, I am definitely getting the cursor. I am invoking the cursor function correctly. I am getting the editor correctly. So now the question is, I'm getting the underlying type. I'm returning the right one because now if I call show editor, we get the editor coming up, but the cursor position is just like all wrong. Which is kind of bizarre. I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure why it's all off. We are calling this. We're calling this native component cursor. When I was just pushing the native component directly, it was working fine. But something about deserializing the... Or not, well, it's not deserializing, but let's Let's just check that out. We'll use the logs. All right. Uh, all right, let's see. Okay, that's interesting. So I am returning something. What if I don't unbox? What if I don't box it? No? Okay. So now it doesn't have to do with the boxes. So just the position that I'm getting from native component cursor is no good. Always bad. Always bad. Why is it always bad? I'm consuming the events. I'm handling the events. I'm rendering against the state. Native component cursor. Okay, the column is always wrong, but the row seems to be fine. But the column doesn't get updated correctly. That's weird. I wonder if it has to do with the fact that it's rendering in the middle of the screen. That could be it. Let me try setting it up to run like in the top left. Okay, that definitely has to do with it. Okay. Well, that's something. Okay. So let's see how it does it, huh? Cursor cache. In screen coordinates. So something, it must be that it's like in the middle of the screen instead of it assumes you're in the top left. That must be the problem. But maybe that's not worth exploring. Maybe it is not worth spending time on trying to figure that out. Although it would be nice if I can figure it out. What would be cooler is building an entire thing from scratch. Now that would be really cool. I just don't know if that's possible. I mean, it's possible. I just don't really want to do it. Yeah, I'm not really sure. It's kind of nasty. Like, where does it? It's in screen coordinates. So I would have to convert. It's in screen coordinates? I am not quite sure why. I'm not 100% sure. I could debug that issue I was having earlier. That would be a nightmare. I think I might do that if I can't immediately figure this one out. All right, let's see. So if I make this 1 on the Y, it's still goofy. That's odd. But if I set it off on the X like 20. Huh. It seems like new lines always work. It's like only the first line's bad. Huh. Okay, well. That's progress. That's progress. That is certainly progress. Yeah, exactly. I don't know where it would be though. But there's another bug. So I'll just hit him with a little this. And crash. There we go. Buffer set style. I'm going to go ahead and just going to do this. I would like less crashing, please. The crashing is really annoying. Otherwise, I do want to work on fixing that bug before I lose my mind. Because now I'm going to think about that bug all week. Until I fix it. Okay, awesome. And then it just gracefully goes off screen. Nice. Awesome. Okay, so now... Oh, I do know what the issue is. I remember there's an off by one somewhere. I remember in the rendering logic. It's like when I render... I remember seeing this, that they like they chop off the top. Is it render that they do it? I remember seeing it. Something like this. They just like clip the bottom. They just subtract 1 from the height. Something like that. Let's try that. Yeah, I think they just clip the bottom. Which maybe is all I need. Or clip the top, something. We'll try both. Okay. Okay. Not quite it. Not quite it. Close, though. They resized the editor to be area clip bottom. -1. I don't know if that'll make a difference. I'm in the depths of guess and check right now. It's not my finest hour. But it is off by 1, so surely at some point I'll figure it out. Close. All right. Not it. Let me see how cursor works. It's editor cursor. This is a bizarre one. Otherwise, I'm going to try to debug that other issue if I can't figure this out in the next 3 minutes. And I'll spend a few minutes debugging that, and then I'll call it a night if I can't figure it out right away. It's weird. It's just the X component, the column component, and it works fine everywhere else. So cursor area. Oh, maybe it's this area. Oh, it doesn't even use it. it just calls editor. So this area doesn't even matter in cursor. You did not miss it. I'm fighting demons right now. This is the literally hell. This is demons. I'm off by 1. The cursor works great here, but it doesn't work on the first line, and I cannot figure it out. Because cursor here checks cursor here, which checks like this cursor cache. Which does something or another somewhere. Okay, well, besides that, I am trying to do a few things at once. And in the midst of doing this, I discovered a bug, so I'm going to try to replicate it in a minified, not Helix environment to save my sanity. So we're gonna find a provide. Okay, so we're gonna provide func or function. Okay, so we have a function here, and then we're gonna look at this, and it's gonna require we're gonna see if this breaks. I don't think it will for some reason, but I could be wrong. When we were running this in Helix, if I named this area instead of found area, it was shadowing a different function that was being used. And as a result, we were getting some issues. It should have errored, and instead we panicked. So I think I need to do something like that too. So we're going to try. Okay, that is more correct. Still not quite what I would have liked it to say. But it didn't error. Right, so this is saying, let's look at the AST. Okay, so we're defining function, and then we're calling it. Okay, it should be working. So this is, there's something wrong here. Okay, so this is getting resolved to this, which is the issue, which it should be, I think is the problem. So it's a little tricky. I wonder what this does in Racket. I think it should error in Racket. I think I think this will error in Racket. So let's actually try. Yeah. Okay. So that is the correct behavior. The error is correct. The manifestation of the error is not my favorite. So, oh. And then we're going to. So if I run this, we're getting function application, not a procedure. So let's look at the bytecode. So we're binding function. We're calling foo. Where do we bind foo? We're calling 206. Great. We're calling 206. All right, we're calling 206. Where is 206 defined? What am I even doing here? Define foo as function. So function's getting resolved to this. Yeah, okay. So we're binding to 206. And we're calling it before it's been bound, like within the same section. So we can probably run. Okay, yeah. So this here, this is the steal bytecode. This is the steal bytecode. It's kind of ugly, but you know, it gets the job done. So what's happening here, which I think is so to preface, I ran into a bug not a few minutes ago. I don't know if you saw this, but basically I defined like this function here or something. I called it like area, and if I do that, it crashes. It crashes, which obviously not good. And the reason it's crashing is we're getting this index out of bounds. And why we're getting an index out of bounds is in the global environment, it's trying to look at an index that doesn't exist yet. Now, there's two problems there. The first is that sucks. They shouldn't do that. It shouldn't panic. Like it's a bug, but I shouldn't be panicking. At least that's the first part. I would prefer to not panic. I don't want it to panic. So I want to understand why we're panicking. So I'm going to go here, 188 in the environment. And it's because of this, REPL lookup index, which is panicking. So that's the first part. We don't want to panic. But the manifestation of the panic is explicitly because we have all this shadowing happening at the global level, which is not necessarily my favorite to like resolve and figure out. So because of how scheme in general, steal, whatever, depending on where your Lisps lie on the spectrum of, on the spectrum of, I don't know what you would call it. Some schemes are more malleable to the global environment and some are less. Steal falls under the Racket ideology, at least. That is my preference, is that it's less malleable at the top level. So if you like introduce a binding at the top level, it shadows the previous one, but only within your module scope. So if you were sitting at the REPL Like we can demo. If we're sitting at the REPL and we start typing some things, let's say like we define foo as 10. So now if I type foo, we'll get 10. If I define a function, let's say like bar, it's going to give me like plus foo x. So if I do this in like 100, we should get 110. So if I redefine foo, if I do it like this, I redefine foo with the define keyword. So I say define foo 67, obviously. So now if I do define bar 100, or sorry, if I just call bar 100, you have two trains of thought, or two schools of thought. The first is it should be 110. The first, it should be 167. I fall into the 110 category, which some people don't like. That's just, it is what it is, okay? So it shadows it in the global environment. It will get freed and reused at some point in the future when it becomes deemed unreachable. So I have to like do, I have to look at all the functions and see what they access, et cetera, and then I determine it unreachable, and it will get freed. Now, that is tricky because this is it makes sense. It makes sense. I think it makes sense. Right. So you could have done it differently though. So let's just start fresh. Let's start fresh. So we get a clean slate. We define foo 10. And we define bar like this. Now instead of saying define foo 67, set foo 67. Now we get the behavior we expected, or we want out of this. So set bang explicitly says go to the global environment and update in place. Define says recreate the binding as a shadow the previous binding. Reason being, that gives me flexibility within a single module context. I can do whatever I want with something that isn't updated by set bang. It gives me like the immutable by default behavior at the quote global level, or the top level bindings, top level bindings within a module. So in this case, like it's actually, you'll notice it. There's all sorts of stuff that happens. Steel does quite a bit of optimizations that may or may not need to happen. Like, so it wouldn't happen in Python, for example. Like, you don't get inlining in Python, but I do inlining. I actually do pretty aggressive inlining within a module, because it turns out that as soon as you get inlining within a module, the JIT works so much better. Because all of a sudden things just work well. So what's tricky here though is because we're providing function, we're defining a function, named function, we're providing it, we're bringing it in here. And then we're also calling it, but we're also defining it. And then we're calling it again. And what's happening is this is resolving to, this is resolving to this, but it hasn't been created yet. Because this doesn't resolve to this one because it's not like in there. So it's just kind of like, hey, is ambiguous, and I just give up. Now, I recently changed the behavior where that, like, if you reference something that hasn't been defined yet, it just returns void. Now, once again, you can come for me and say, maybe that should just be an error. Well, the reason I did that is because in an environment like an embedded interpreter environment, a lot of times you're doing some really funny business with how you're like loading the modules in, especially when you're interacting with stuff at the global namespace. So I found, like, in order to do dynamic loading of modules in Helix, where I could, like, instead of statically requiring everything in my init.sem file or whatever, my helix.sem, I made it like dynamically require it. So it sort of like induces callbacks back onto the REPL instance to say like, okay, load this module, load this module, load this module. That way I could say if any of those modules fail to load, don't like bail on everything. And in order to get things to like behave correctly, it actually made sense to say like, hey, sometimes I might resolve to identifiers that haven't existed yet. So don't error. Like, don't panic. Just error in some noticeable capacity. So it's just kind of like a late binding, if you will. But it still gives me the flexibility of doing all these other optimizations that I wanted to. Because if push comes to shove, like, things will just blow up. Like, you'll just error because something hasn't been initialized yet. So it's just kind of like, quote, undefined behavior, but it's not undefined behavior in like the nefarious sense. It's just like there are strange interactions with evaluation order with respect to loading modules in a dynamic require context. I don't know if that makes sense. That was really complicated. Hello, lazy schemer, what's up? So the point is, though, I don't want to panic. So I'm going to try to figure out why that was panicking. So what we were in env. Am I using... Yes, I am using hash array mapped trees. I am. They are very nice. I did not implement them myself. There is a library that exists, a very popular Rust library. There's been multiple forks of it. I've forked it now myself for like the third in the chain of forks because I needed to do some stuff with it. So I'll study up. I'm familiar with the data structure though, but I didn't implement it myself, which is a bit of a bummer. I kind of wanted to, but haven't found the time yet. Okay, so let's find that. REPL lookup index. Okay, so I'm calling this in a bunch of spots. Okay, I'm going to ignore the JIT for now. Okay. I think I know what the problem is. Is that I think I know what the problem was with the bug at least. So what I need to do is I need to replace this with a call to not just blindly trust the value there. And I'll have a slow path for if I'm calling a function. If I'm calling a function that doesn't exist yet. Bail out. But I really should figure this one out earlier. I think this should be able to be fixed during compilation. Especially for things like this, like call global tail. I should be able to evaluate whether or not this thing is going to be bound by then. I mean, I can take a look. Okay, so within the bytecode, this evaluates to 206. What did I say again? I already forgot. So it's failing here. Well, I guess we weren't even getting to this part. Well, no. We should be able to. We should be able to do this. Progress. Okay, so what am I trying to do? I want to see if this is I'm referencing an identifier before use. But I want to be pretty pessimistic or pretty relaxed about it, pretty conservative with the enforcement. So this is line... I'm binding foo. And I'm calling function 194. Calling 194. But 194 hasn't been bound yet. And then I bind 194. But see what's tricky. I think I know why. Okay. Yeah, because if I did like... If I did this... Right. Okay, see, that seems to work. Right. Okay, so it's just because it's at the top level. Because it's at the top level, it's unhappy. Because now function, this is referencing something that has come later. This should still be an error, though. Shouldn't it? This should be an error. Well, not that Racket is necessarily the canonical source of truth. But I am curious what they do. Okay, no, it's 10. It's 10. Okay. Okay, I was right. Okay. That's not bad. Okay, so now let's... some of the ugliest code ever in this. All right, so now let's go check. I think I call it first pass defines. Yes. Let's change the theme. We'll go here. Mix it up. Okay, so what is the case that we're trying to capture? I'm calling... Like, we're still at the top level. So we're starting sdef. So we're starting a definition. And I'm calling global. And this has not been defined yet. All right, let's check this out. Okay, see, I'm literally like, am I crazy? Do I not do this? Second pass defines. Flat defines is some, and second pass defines is none. This logic is cursed. I forget exactly how it works. I have forgotten. Okay, so I go through and I'm looking at all of the binds. And I guess the issue is I go through and I find foo is bound the right hand side of the definition is a flat define. Maybe I don't handle this at all. Because the whole point is I haven't actually referenced it yet. How do I want to do this? Okay, so during the first pass, flat defines. Oh, this is interesting. We are actually binding this to the function out of the module. And then when I call foo, it's actually calling that function. What the heck is going on here? Okay, this is, I was looking at the wrong bytecode. No wonder I was so confused. It's actually very strange. I'm calling 597, which is bound down here, but it's being named the same thing. So there's a bug in here somewhere in the compiler. Well, really, I need to look at these. I think when I'm in this context yet, I haven't yet labeled them. I'm only looking at the syntax, which is probably why it's not behaving. I'm not looking at the offsets. We haven't actually created the indexes yet. So what's happening here, I'll explain. I'll explain a little better. We call a global. First, we have a name, but that name eventually resolves to something. And then that name resolves to an index in the global environment. So we don't have to hash all the time. We're just looking up the an offset. But what's tricky is this function here, where I'm in this call global, which is right here. So we're on line 3, calling function. That's what's here. But the function this is resolving to is a different function. It's resolving to provide. It's resolving to this. At least this name is that. That's what the name is. Whether or not that's correct is, I think, the issue. I maybe don't want to trust this. That's what's tripping me up. Let me run this a different way. Because the code is getting compiled as a module, which I think is why things are getting tricky. When you invoke it at the command line, it runs in a different way. There's two different environment modes. There's like the top level, and then there's the top level, and then there's not. There's module form. So at the top level, this would be evaluated like line by line. So you would call that require provide. And then you would call this. Like, and then if we pasted all of this together, then it works. But because it's getting compiled as a module, I think there's some optimization happening that is bogus. And I don't think it's going to be caught here. Which means maybe I need to add another pass later, but I don't want to keep adding passes to the code. It's already slow. Compilation's already kind of slow. Already kind of slow. Call global. It's resolving to 640. All right, so where do I replace? Where am I replacing? I mean, at some point, I turn these. When do I do it? Maybe I just do it here. I guess I do it here. So we have to, there's a symbol map that backs all of the globals in order to figure out like where the offsets are. And that's where things get tricky. It must be here then. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's where this bug is. The first pass defines. I think during module compilation, we are somehow there's a bug. But we should still be able to fix it. Because the offsets are correct. So now what's happening is we're calling 640 down here before it's bound. And we're still at the top level. That should be fixable. Because we're saying like bind. Yeah. Where are we? Yeah, bind edef. We're calling 640. And 640 is not bound yet. So really, I should be able to say call global. When do I convert the call globals? This is maybe dense instruction. Okay, so I do it during the second pass. I go second pass defines, can I reference an identifier before its definition? And depth equals 0. I feel like I should be hitting this. I feel like I should be hitting this case. Because we're calling global 640, but it's only been bound here. And it was bound at the top level. It was bound at the top level. And depth is 0. Only one way to find out. Little print debug for the fans. We're simply not getting here. All right. Let's see if that does a job. It would be cool if I could get this working. I definitely think the last time I tried to debug this, I gave up. Hence why I'm so confused coming back to it. Okay, so we're getting a second pass define, which is why we're not... Okay, let's also try. One more pass. Okay, so we're at depth 0. All right, I'll try this. If we're at depth 0 and it's in both... Okay. If it's defined after its invocation? Maybe? What's going on here? Let's try this. Did I like break Rust Analyzer? No. Okay. Let's try that. Right. I feel like this is an issue because I bootstrap in a certain fashion. find will executor running. All right, so we are... This is no good. Yeah, okay, so I think the issue is I'm bootstrapping the standard library, which breaks all the rules during bootstrapping. But then I need that to not be the problem during the normal time, normal runtime. Okay, so we would error there. Kind of looks like I had this exact situation happen. If okay, let's check. All right, one more pass. Not confident in this fix. I'm going to need to think about this more. Okay. Okay. I mean, I think I have the logic sound on why it's happening. But now I need to just ironclad figure out the exact error condition. Yeah, see, we're going to error so much. I mean, I can probably check if we're in like a bootstrapping phase, but I really don't want to do it that way. Yeah. I mean, this might actually work as much as I hate it. This is definitely going up on a branch, though, and I will be testing rigorously. Okay, that did work, but I don't think it's a great fix. That's okay. We're going to go ahead and throw that up on a branch. And then I still have some fixes. Okay, so now the question is, does it actually fix? Does it actually fix Helix? My bug that I had. So we will check. And that's probably the last thing I'm doing tonight. All right. One little last fix, and then I'll call it a night. Got work tomorrow. Let's see. Okay. It's still panicked. It's still panicked. That is a bummer. Dang. All right. More debugging. More debugging needed. Oh, you know, I think I know why. Oh, that sucks. I think it's because the depth is off. Because we eval the buffer. And therefore, because we're in an evaled scenario, the depth is +1. So I need to weigh. I think I need a way to signal that we're inside of an eval. All right. I think I will be done for tonight though, because yeah, that's the bug. Okay, so we're doing the compile time detection, I think, correctly in general now. I need to add another check that says if we're in an eval, basically lower the depth by 1. Because the depth will be artificially raised. Because it's inside of a function, the eval function. But okay. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Appreciate it. I'm going to probably stream more this week. Thanks again. Catch y'all later. Bye.